The marble columns of the mansion caught the soft glow of a crystal chandelier, bathing the bedroom in a warm, golden light. Silk sheets cascaded over the oversized king bed like molten silver, and the mirrored ceiling above reflected every curve of the room. The air carried the scent of expensive perfume, notes of musk and jasmine mingling with the faint leather aroma from vintage armchairs. This was Ethan's world, a real estate tycoon with piercing eyes and an iron grip. His empire of luxury properties raked in millions, but his true obsession was control, over wealth, over people, over their deepest desires. Lila stood before a full-length mirror, her figure draped in a sheer champagne-colored negligee. The delicate fabric clung to her curves, hinting at the outlines of her body beneath. She traced her fingers over the diamond necklace at her throat, a gift from Ethan, as cold as his demeanor. Their marriage had long become a gilded cage. He claimed her physically, but her spirit remained untouched. His games nights where he directed her to perform for others under his watchful eye had lost their thrill. Lila craved more. She yearned for a spark. Ethan stepped into the bedroom, his tailored suit from a high-end designer fitting him flawlessly, though his gaze carried a familiar weight. He paused, a glass of bourbon in hand, and studied her like she was a prized possession. "You look stunning," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. He closed the distance, his finger grazing her collarbone, trailing downward. Lila shivered, not from desire but from the hollowness of his touch. "I'm leaving tonight." "Business," he said curtly, finishing his drink. His lips curled into a smirk. "Don't get bored." She nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. When the door clicked shut behind him, Lila exhaled. She sank onto the silk sheets, her fingers brushing her thighs. Memories of those nights, when Ethan orchestrated her surrender to strangers while he observed, stirred a mix of revulsion and a faint, lingering heat. She despised his dominance, yet her body recalled the fleeting pleasure. Closing her eyes, she imagined someone else. Not him. Jake entered without knocking. The new bodyguard, hired by Ethan, was a study in raw strength, broad shoulders, muscles straining against a fitted black shirt, and eyes that held a flicker of defiance. He stood by the door, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the sheer negligee. "Checking the house," he said in a low, steady voice, but he didn't move. Lila sat up on the bed, her legs parting slightly, the silk hem riding up to reveal her thighs. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew he noticed. "Always so thorough?" Her voice was husky, laced with a playful edge. Jake took a step closer, his boots thudding softly on the polished hardwood floor. "Only when there's something worth protecting," he replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Lila felt a rush of warmth spreading through her veins. Her body responded, the fabric of her negligee betraying her quickening breath. She didn't bother to adjust it. She wanted him to look. She wanted him to tear away the delicate silk and pin her to the bed, filling the void Ethan left behind. She rose, gliding toward him, her hips swaying subtly. The mirrors captured them, her slender frame against his imposing silhouette. "Aren't you afraid of him?" she whispered, standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. Jake leaned in, his breath brushing her neck. "Are you?" he countered, his fingers grazing her wrist. That brief touch was enough. Her skin ignited, a pulse of desire stirring within her, her breath catching. She imagined him above her, his strong hands gripping her hips, moving with the intensity she craved. "Leave," she said, her voice trembling. Jake's lips quirked, and he stepped back, but his eyes promised more. When he left, Lila collapsed onto the bed, her fingers slipping beneath the negligee, chasing the fire that burned within. She knew Jake would return, and she knew that on this bed, beneath the mirrored ceiling, they would break every rule. The bedroom was cloaked in shadow, with only the crystal chandelier casting golden flickers across the marble walls. The king-sized bed, draped in midnight blue silk sheets, looked like a stage for forbidden desires. The mirrored ceiling captured every angle, every silhouette. Lila lay sprawled across the bed, her sheer negligee hiked up, baring her thighs. After Jake's departure, her body still thrummed with heat, her fingers trembling from the rush of her own touch. She wanted him. She wanted him to shatter the gilded cage that trapped her. The door creaked. Jake stepped inside, his black shirt clinging to his chiseled frame, his eyes glinting with a predator's intensity. "You called," he said in a low, gravelly tone, but his gaze was already consuming her, the delicate outline of her body beneath the silk, the curve of her waist, the subtle sheen of her skin. Lila propped herself up, her chest rising, the negligee slipping off one shoulder. "I didn't call," she lied, but her legs parted slightly, an unspoken invitation. Jake moved closer, his boots thudding softly on the hardwood floor. "Then why are you looking at me like that?" His voice was rough, almost a growl. She didn't answer. Instead, she rose and closed the distance between them, her fingers brushing his chest, feeling the warmth beneath the fabric. Jake seized her wrists, pulling her against him, his lips grazing her neck. Lila let out a soft moan, her body arching as his teeth nipped gently at her skin. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but her hands were already tugging at his shirt, buttons scattering across the plush rug. His torso, glistening with a faint sheen of sweat, gleamed in the chandelier's light, muscles flexing under her touch. He guided her back to the bed, the silk sheets crumpling beneath her. Lila's legs parted, the negligee riding up to reveal her fully. Jake shed the rest of his clothes, his evident desire pressing against her thigh. She gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders as he moved with her in a single, powerful motion. The bed creaked, the mirrors reflecting their entwined forms. Her parted thighs, his steady rhythm, the sweat glistening on their skin. Lila's breaths became cries, unrestrained, echoing through the room. "More," she gasped, and Jake obliged, his movements growing fiercer, almost relentless. A wave of ecstasy crashed over her body trembling as warmth spread across the sheets. Jake didn't pause, his breathing heavy, his hands gripping her hips with bruising force. She wanted him again, wanted to drown in this forbidden rush. The brass candlesticks on the nightstands quivered with their motion, the scent of her perfume blending with the raw intensity of their connection. Lila turned her head, catching their reflection in the mirror, her tousled hair, his taut frame, their bodies locked together. It was beautiful and reckless. Jake shifted her, guiding her to her knees, and moved with her again. Her chest swayed, the silk brushing against her skin, sending fresh sparks of pleasure. She bit her lip, feeling him fully, his fingers pressing into her hips. "You're mine," he growled, and she surrendered completely, lost in the moment. The bed groaned beneath them, the velvet throw bunched up, the cool hardwood floor brushing her palms. Another surge of bliss shook her, and she cried out his name, heedless of the consequences. The door flew open. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face a mask of fury, but his eyes burned with something darker, more twisted. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his fingers clutched his phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. Lila froze, her heart plummeting. Jake stilled, his chest heaving, but he didn't release her. Ethan stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking deliberately on the hardwood. "How charming," he said, his voice colder than a winter storm. He raised his phone, the camera lens glinting like a malevolent eye. Lila scrambled to cover herself, but the sheets were out of reach. Jake tensed, braced for a fight, but Ethan drew a sleek handgun from beneath his jacket. "Don't move," he commanded, his lips twisting into a chilling smile. The opulence of the bedroom's silk, marble, mirrors, had become a trap, exposing their transgression. Lila's body trembled, not just from fear. Something in Ethan's gaze promised a game she dreaded but couldn't escape. The bedroom, thick with the lingering heat of intimacy, glowed softly under the golden light of the crystal chandelier. The silk sheets on the king-sized bed lay in disarray, and the mirrored ceiling captured the frozen figures of Lila and Jake, caught in a moment of dread. Ethan stood in the doorway, his sleek handgun gleaming with cold menace, while the phone in his other hand recorded, its lens greedily seizing every shaky breath. His face was a mask of rage, but his eyes burned with something sick, almost feverish. "Keep going," he growled, striding deliberately toward a leather armchair by the bed. The hardwood floor echoed faintly under his polished shoes. Lila trembled, her chest, slick with sweat, rising and falling heavily. She tried to cover herself, but Ethan aimed the gun at her. "Don't you dare," he snapped, his voice like a lash. Jake, still close to her, tensed, his muscles glistening, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You're twisted," he spat, but Ethan only smirked, settling into the chair. His fingers gripped the armrests, the phone now propped on a stand, its camera rolling. "Make love to her," he said, leaning forward, "or I'll put a bullet in your head." Lila stifled a sob, her thighs quivering, but she knew Ethan wasn't bluffing. She glanced at Jake, her eyes pleading for forgiveness, but her body betrayed her, a lingering heat still pulsed within her. Jake cursed under his breath but complied, his hands firmly grasping her waist. He moved again, slowly, reluctantly, each motion feeling like a betrayal. The bed creaked, the silk rustled, and the mirrors reflected their humiliation, her parted legs, his taut frame, the sweat trailing down their skin. Lila bit her lip to suppress a moan, but her body responded against her will, her breath quickening, warmth spreading despite the shame. Ethan watched, his breathing growing heavier. He unbuttoned the top of his shirt, his fingers trembling not from anger, but from a perverse thrill. "Louder," he ordered Lila, his voice thick with excitement. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, but Jake quickened his pace, his movements stirring unwanted waves of pleasure. She gasped, hating herself, hating him, hating the camera's unblinking eye that captured every moment. The brass candlesticks on the nightstands rattled faintly, the scent of her perfume mingling with the sharp tang of sweat and fear. "You've always been a temptress," Ethan said, his words cutting like a blade. He leaned closer, his gaze fixed on her trembling form, on her face twisted with a mix of shame and ecstasy. Jake growled, his movements turning fierce, as if punishing them both. Lila cried out, an unwilling climax crashing through her body shaking as the sheets grew damp. She collapsed onto the bed, her hair splayed, her chest heaving with each ragged breath. Jake stilled, his fists clenched, but Ethan's gun remained steady. "Nice performance," Ethan said, rising from the chair. He stopped the recording but left the phone on the table, a silent threat. His eyes raked over Lila, over her quivering thighs, over the traces of sweat on her skin. "You stay here," he told her sharply, then turned to Jake. "You and I, we're going to have a talk." His voice was icy, but Lila caught a sinister edge in it. She wanted to scream, to lunge for Jake, but fear rooted her in place. Ethan led Jake out, and the door slammed shut like a final judgment. Lila was alone, her body still trembling from both ecstasy and terror. She curled up on the bed, the silk chilling her skin, the mirrors mocking her. The opulence of the bedroom, marble, velvet, the diamonds at her throat, had become a prison. She knew Jake wouldn't come back. She knew Ethan wouldn't forgive. But worst of all was the realization that a dark, broken part of her still craved this, the camera, the pain, the sin. She closed her eyes, the echo of her own cries ringing in her ears, and understood that the nightmare was only beginning. The night enveloped the forest, moonlight filtering through bare branches, casting eerie shadows on the damp grass. A chilly wind carried the scent of pine and earth, drowning out the distant hum of the city. Ethan led Jake deeper into the woods, his handgun cold in his palm. The black SUV waited behind them, its headlights off, its trunk empty for now. Jake walked ahead, his broad shoulders tense, hands bound behind his back. He knew this wasn't a talk. His blood still burned from the bedroom, from Lila, from the humiliation under the camera's gaze. "Keep moving," Ethan ordered, his voice sharp as a blade. His tailored suit, pristine even in the mud, stood in stark contrast to the raw wilderness. Jake stopped by an ancient oak, his breath steaming in the cold air. "You're a sick monster," he spat, turning to face him. Ethan's lips curled into a predatory smile, his eyes glinting like a wolf's. "You touched my wife," he said, raising the gun. "In my bed. Under my mirrors." His words dripped with venom, but beneath them lurked something else, pain tangled with a twisted hunger. Jake lunged, but the bullet was faster. The gunshot shattered the silence, blood splattering across the bark, and Jake's body crumpled into the mud. His eyes, defiant moments ago, went dull. Blood pooled, soaking into the earth, its metallic scent mingling with the forest dampness. Ethan stood over him, his breathing steady. He wiped the gun with a monogrammed silk handkerchief and tossed it into the dirt. The SUV's trunk swallowed Jake's body like a grave. The forest held its silence, guarding Ethan's secret. Back at the mansion, Ethan entered the bedroom where Lila sat on the bed. The silk sheets, still carrying the faint musk of betrayal, lay in a tangled heap. Her sheer robe barely covered her, her chest rising unevenly with each breath. She hadn't slept. Her eyes, red from tears, tracked his every move. Mud clung to his polished shoes, and a faint bloodstain marred his shirt cuff. The acrid hint of gunpowder lingered around him, blending with his cologne, cedar, and leather. "Where's Jake?" she whispered, though the answer hung heavy in her heart. "Fired," Ethan said, his voice as smooth as the marble floor beneath him. He approached, his fingers lifting her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "He's no longer an issue." Lila shivered, goosebumps prickling her skin, not from the cold. She saw death in his eyes, saw the lie, but fear choked her words. The mirrored ceiling reflected them. Her fragile form, his commanding presence, the diamonds at her throat glinting like a collar. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand sliding along her thigh, rough, yet laced with a shadow of past passion. "You're mine," he said, his fingers pressing into her skin, leaving faint marks. Lila turned away, but her body betrayed her, a spark of heat flaring where he touched. She despised herself for it, for the way his dominance still stirred her, even now, after everything. The bedroom's luxury, velvet drapes, brass candlesticks, silk beneath her, was a trap, steeped in their sins. Ethan rose, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it onto the armchair, the same one where he'd sat, watching her shame through the camera's lens. "Sleep," he said curtly, heading to the bathroom. Lila remained alone, her fingers clutching the sheets, still damp from her transgression. She knew Jake was dead. She knew the mud on Ethan's shoes meant the forest, blood, finality. But worse was the truth: she couldn't escape. She couldn't run. Not now. The mansion's golden cage, with its marble and mirrors, held her tighter than any lock. She lay down, closing her eyes, but Jake's image, his body, his cries, his blood, haunted her, merging with Ethan's cold stare. Rain pounded against the bedroom windows, its rhythm echoing in the stillness. The marble walls gleamed under the soft glow of the crystal chandelier, and the silk sheets on the king-sized bed bore the marks of betrayal, crumpled, damp, steeped in sin. Lila sat on the edge of the bed, her sheer robe barely covering her chest, the diamond necklace chilling her throat like a collar. Her fingers trembled, clutching Ethan's phone, left carelessly on the table. The screen blazed with their shame, a video of her and Jake, their bodies entwined, her cries captured by the camera. But there was more, a second recording from the forest. Blood. A gunshot. Jake's body collapsing into the mud. Lila gasped, her heart constricting. She'd known Jake was gone, but seeing it, his eyes dimming in the moonlight, was a blow that stole her breath. The mirrored ceiling reflected her, pale, hair disheveled, lips still tingling with the memory of his touch. The bedroom's opulence, velvet drapes, brass candlesticks, the lingering scent of her perfume felt suffocating, a gilded cage. Ethan had killed, and he would come for her next. She gripped the phone, nails biting into her palms. Run? Surrender? Or play his game? The doors swung open. Ethan stepped inside, his suit impeccable, but his eyes, dark, predatory, betrayed the beast within. He noticed the phone in her hands but didn't flinch. "Curious, aren't you?" he said, his voice smooth as the marble beneath his shoes. He closed the distance, snatching the phone but leaving it on. Instead, he played the video, their video. Lila's moans filled the room, her cries under the camera's cold gaze. She turned away, but he seized her chin, forcing her to watch. "You loved it," he whispered, his breath grazing her neck, sending shivers down her spine. Lila trembled, her body betraying her as warmth flickered within, responding to his control. "You killed him," she blurted, her voice shaking but her eyes defiant. Ethan's lips curled into a smirk, his fingers sliding along her thigh, roughly parting the silk. "He was nothing," he said, pressing closer. His evident desire brushed against her leg, and she hated herself for the heat that stirred in her core. "You're mine," he growled, his hand cupping her chest, fingers pinching until she winced. She shoved him back, but he was stronger. He pushed her onto the bed, the silk crumpling beneath her, the mirrors capturing their struggle. "You're as filthy as I am," he said, his lips finding her neck, teeth grazing her skin. Lila gasped, despising herself, despising him, yet her body yielded, legs parting under his weight. He could kill her, like Jake, but a twisted part of her craved this pain, sin, his dominance. She was trapped, and the luxury around her, marble, silk, diamonds, only tightened her chains. "I'll tell," she gasped, clinging to a final spark of resistance. Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing. "And what?" he said, standing. "You're on that video. You surrendered to him. Who's going to believe a woman like you?" His words cut deep, and he was right. She was complicit, stained by their shared sins. He tossed the phone onto the table, his shadow falling over her like a net. "Sleep," he said, walking out, but his smile promised this wasn't over. Lila was alone, her body trembling with fear and desire. She could run, take the video, find the police, risk everything. Or stay, embrace his world, where luxury and depravity were her shackles. She lay back, the silk chilling her skin, the rain drumming outside. The mirrors stared down, reflecting a woman she no longer recognized. Run or surrender. She closed her eyes, and Jake's image, his blood, his body, merged with Ethan's voice. The choice was hers. But was it? The bedroom exuded extravagance. Marble walls caught the shimmer of the crystal chandelier, and the silk sheets on the king-sized bed bore the faint traces of their sins. Lila sat before the mirror, her sheer robe slipping to reveal her chest, the diamond necklace, a gift from Ethan, cooling her throat like a chain. The phone, holding the video of her shame and Jake's murder, lay locked in a drawer, as unreachable as her hopes. She knew the truth. Ethan, A formidable tycoon with boundless control had killed Jake and would kill her if she spoke. Fear paralyzed her, yet the mansion's luxury was her prison. Ethan entered, his suit carrying the scent of cologne and authority. His eyes, predatory, pierced her reflection in the mirror. "You're mine," he said, his fingers tracing her throat, pressing against the necklace. Lila trembled, a spark of heat flaring within her, her body betraying her under his rough touch. He pushed her onto the bed, the silk crumpling beneath her, his hand lifting her robe to bare her thighs. "You won't run," he whispered, his evident desire brushing against her skin. She gasped, hating herself, yet yielding, her body responding to his touch. The mirrors captured them, her surrender, his victory. Lila had accepted this life, a life in chains, where velvet drapes and marble masked her pain. She would never speak. Ethan was her judge, her executioner, her captor. The rain outside washed away her tears, and she closed her eyes, sinking into a world of luxury and depravity, forever his.